The screen flickered to life, and there she was. Emily. Her familiar laughter spilled through the speakers, but it wasn't just her. A man's voice joined hers, low, teasing, intimate. The camera shook slightly, then steadied, revealing them tangled together on our bed. But let me tell you from the beginning. I guess you could say Emily and I were the couple everyone envied. We met 8 years ago, got married 6 years back, and for the longest time, our life felt like something out of a rom-com. Emily had this spark, this magnetic energy that made everyone around her want to bask in her light. She was ambitious, sharp, and fiercely independent, which were some of the things I admired most about her. We didn't have kids yet. Her career in marketing was her baby, and I respected that. For the first 5 years of our marriage, everything felt solid. Sure, we had the occasional argument about the usual stuff, money, household chores, which Netflix show to binge, but nothing out of the ordinary. We communicated, or so I thought. I believed we were a team. Looking back, though, the cracks started showing about a year ago. At first, they were subtle, so subtle that I brushed them off. Emily started working late more often. She chalked it up to a new, demanding client at her firm, and I didn't question it. Why would I? She was dedicated to her job, and I'd always admired her drive. But then there were the changes I couldn't ignore. She became distant, both emotionally and physically. Date nights turned into her scrolling through her phone under the guise of checking emails. Conversations felt hollow, like she was giving me just enough attention to keep me from noticing something was off. I remember one particular evening when I tried to surprise her with dinner. I'd cooked her favorite meal, chicken marsala, and even lit a few candles. When she walked through the door, she barely glanced at the table. "I already ate," she mumbled, brushing past me to the bedroom. No apology, no explanation. Just that. Her phone became a constant companion. I'd catch her smiling at the screen, typing furiously, only to lock it the second I walked into the room. I joked about her secret life once, and she laughed it off, saying, "If only my life were that exciting." I laughed too, but something about her tone stuck with me. Then there were the small lies, the ones I desperately wanted to believe. She'd say she was meeting a friend for drinks, but when I asked who, her answers felt off. Vague. "Oh, just some work friends," she'd say, avoiding eye contact. I knew her work friends. She used to tell me all about them. Suddenly, they were nameless, faceless entities. At one point I noticed she'd started wearing perfume again, an expensive one I hadn't seen in years. She brushed it off as a gift from a coworker. "They were handing out samples at the office," she'd said with a shrug. I wanted to believe her. I really did. I told myself I was overthinking. After all, we'd been together for years. Trust was the foundation of our relationship. But the gut feeling wouldn't go away. One day, I decided to test the waters. I suggested we go away for the weekend, just the two of us. Her reaction hit me like a ton of bricks. "I can't," she said quickly, almost too quickly. "There's a big pitch coming up. You know how work is." Her smile was forced, and the way she avoided my gaze spoke volumes. But it wasn't just her behavior that set off alarms, it was the way I started feeling around her. The warmth, the closeness, it was all fading. I started second-guessing myself, wondering if I was doing something wrong. Was I not enough for her anymore? Had I become boring? The final straw came 3 weeks ago. I was cleaning up after dinner when I noticed a charge on our joint credit card for a hotel. The date was last Friday, a night she'd claimed to be at a networking event. When I asked her about it, her face turned pale, but she quickly recovered, laughing it off as a mistake. "Oh, that's just a mix-up with the company card. I'll get it sorted." Her explanation didn't sit right, but I let it go. Or rather, I told myself I was letting it go. The truth was, I didn't want to face the possibility that something was deeply wrong. Looking back now, I realize how much I ignored, how many red flags I chose to overlook because I couldn't bear the thought of what they might mean. I convinced myself that Emily was just stressed, that our relationship was going through a rough patch, like all marriages do. But I should have trusted my instincts. They were screaming at me, louder and louder each day. And then came the flash drive. It was a Thursday morning, one of those unremarkable starts to the day that would normally fade into the blur of memory. Emily was in a rush, as usual. She darted around the kitchen, half dressed in her blazer and pencil skirt, clutching a steaming travel mug in one hand and her phone in the other. "Did you see my flash drive?" she asked, her tone sharp and hurried. I glanced up from the newspaper and shook my head. "No idea. What color is it?" "Silver. You know, the one I always use for work." She shot me an exasperated look, as if I should have an inventory of her belongings in my head. She darted out of the kitchen to search the living room, her heels clicking against the hardwood. A few minutes later, she reappeared, muttering something about being late and how I never help her look for things. With a quick, distracted kiss on my cheek, she was gone, leaving a faint trail of her expensive perfume in the air. It wasn't until later that afternoon, when I was tidying up the kitchen, that I spotted it. A small silver flash drive, sitting inconspicuously on the counter near the coffee maker. I picked it up, thinking I'd text Emily to let her know I'd found it. But then curiosity crept in. I wasn't snooping, I told myself. I'd done it before, checked her flash drives for misplaced files or to print something out for her. She often stored work documents there, and it wasn't unusual for me to help her with last-minute presentations. I figured this was no different. I plugged the drive into my laptop, expecting spreadsheets, PowerPoint decks, or maybe some client reports. Instead, I saw a folder named Personal. The first alarm bell rang in my head, but I ignored it. Maybe it was photos or something harmless. A quick glance wouldn't hurt, right? I clicked on the folder. At first, it looked normal enough. Pictures of us from vacations, holiday gatherings, even some random shots of our dog from years ago. But then, as I scrolled, I noticed something strange. A new subfolder labeled with a single emoji, a heart. My pulse quickened. I clicked it open, and the contents hit me like a freight train. The first thing I saw was a video file. The thumbnail alone was enough to make my stomach churn, a blurry image of two people in bed. Our bed. My chest tightened as I hovered over the file, paralyzed by a sick sense of dread. I clicked play. The video started with Emily's voice, light and playful, followed by the voice of a man I didn't recognize. They were laughing, teasing each other, their words laced with intimacy. The camera shifted, and there they were, together, tangled in a moment I should never have had to witness. My heart pounded so loudly in my ears that I barely heard the rest of the video. I slammed the space bar to pause it, my hands trembling as I gripped the laptop. But it wasn't just the video. There were dozens of files, photos, more videos, even a text document with dates and times that seemed suspiciously like a record of their meetings. My mind reeled as I tried to process what I was seeing. My first instinct was denial. This couldn't be real. Maybe it was an old fling, something from before we got married. But the timestamps told a different story. These weren't relics of the past, they were recent. Some were as fresh as last week. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at the screen, my thoughts spiraling. Who was this man? How long had this been going on? Was I some kind of idiot, oblivious to everything happening right under my nose? I wanted to stop looking, to close the laptop and throw the flash drive into the trash, but I couldn't. I clicked on more files, each one another stab to the heart. One photo stood out, a candid shot of Emily and him at a restaurant I didn't recognize. Her smile was wide, her eyes lit up in a way I hadn't seen in years. She looked happy. Happier than I'd seen her in a long time. And that realization cut deeper than anything else. I spent the rest of the day in a daze, replaying every interaction we'd had over the past year. Her late nights, her coldness, the lies she fed me with such ease, they all came flooding back, connecting like puzzle pieces. How could I have been so blind? By the time Emily came home that evening, I'd hidden the flash drive in my desk drawer. I wasn't ready to confront her. Not yet. I needed time to figure out what to say, how to even begin to address what I'd discovered. She walked through the door, smiling faintly as she set her bag down. "Hey," she said casually, as if everything were perfectly normal. I managed a nod, my throat too tight to speak. Inside, though, I was screaming. For the next 2 days, I lived in a haze of suppressed rage and heartbreak. Emily went about her routines as if nothing had changed, completely oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. Every glance, every word out of her mouth felt like a mockery, and I couldn't decide if I wanted to scream at her or break down and cry. By Saturday evening, I couldn't take it anymore. I'd spent the entire day replaying the evidence in my head, staring at the flash drive I'd hidden in my desk. The videos, the photos, the undeniable proof, it all weighed on me like a boulder crushing my chest. I had to confront her, no matter how much I dreaded it. That night, after dinner, I waited for the moment when she seemed relaxed. She was curled up on the couch, scrolling through her phone, a glass of wine in her hand. Her expression was serene, almost smug, as if she had no care in the world. I sat down across from her, trying to steady my voice. "We need to talk." Her eyes flicked up, briefly meeting mine before narrowing slightly. "What about?" she asked, her tone cautious but dismissive, like she was already preparing to brush me off. I leaned forward, my hands clasped together to stop them from shaking. "About the flash drive you left on the counter." Her face froze for a split second, but she recovered quickly, setting her wine glass down with deliberate calmness. "What about it?" I could feel my heart pounding, but I kept my voice steady. "I looked at it. I saw what's on it." She blinked, her expression shifting to one of confusion, forced confusion. "What do you mean? What's on it?" "Don't," I said sharply, my voice rising despite my attempt to stay composed. "Don't play dumb, Emily. I saw the videos. The photos. Everything." Her mouth opened as if to speak, but no words came out. For the first time, I saw a flicker of panic in her eyes, quickly replaced by indignation. "You went through my personal files?" she said, her voice rising with feigned outrage. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Are you seriously trying to make this about me? You left the flash drive on the counter, Emily. What did you expect?" She stood up abruptly, crossing her arms over her chest. "I can't believe you'd invade my privacy like that. Those files, they're none of your business." I felt my blood boil at her audacity. "None of my business? Are you joking right now? You're cheating on me, Emily. With some guy in our bed, for God's sake. How is that none of my business?" She flinched at the word, cheating, but quickly regained her composure, her expression hardening. "It's not what you think," she said, her voice laced with defiance. "Oh, really?" I shot back, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Because it looks pretty damn clear to me. The dates, the videos, the hotel charges, what part of this am I misunderstanding?" She hesitated, her gaze darting to the floor. Then, as if a switch had flipped, she changed tactics. "You know what? Maybe if you paid more attention to me, I wouldn't have felt the need to seek attention elsewhere." Her words hit me like a slap. I stared at her, dumbfounded. "Are you actually blaming me for this? For your choice to betray me? I'm not saying it's all your fault," she said, her tone icy. "But you've been so distant lately. Always working, always distracted. What did you expect me to do?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "So this is my fault because I've been working to support us? That's rich, Emily. You're unbelievable." She rolled her eyes, a gesture so dismissive it made my blood boil. "It's not like it was serious," she muttered. "It was just a distraction. It didn't mean anything." I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head in disbelief. "A distraction? You call sneaking around, lying to my face, and sleeping with someone else a distraction? Do you even hear yourself right now?" Her defenses crumbled slightly, her voice softening as she tried a new angle. "Mark, I didn't mean for you to find out like this. I was going to end it. I don't know. Things got complicated." "Complicated?" I repeated, my voice breaking. You made a choice, Emily. A series of choices. Don't sit here and pretend you're the victim. For a moment, silence hung heavy between us. Her bravado seemed to falter, and she sank back onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. I'm sorry, she whispered, barely audible. But her apology felt hollow, like an afterthought. It wasn't remorse for what she'd done, it was regret that she'd been caught. I stood up, unable to stay in the same room with her any longer. Sorry doesn't fix this, Emily. I don't even know who you are anymore. As I walked out of the living room, her voice followed me. Mark, wait! Can we talk about this? Please? But I didn't turn around. I locked myself in the guest room that night, the flash drive still tucked away in my desk. Emily knocked on the door a few times, her pleas muffled and insincere. I ignored her, staring at the ceiling as the weight of her betrayal settled over me like a suffocating blanket. I'd imagined this confrontation in so many ways, her breaking down, confessing everything, begging for forgiveness. But the reality was far worse. She hadn't just betrayed me, she tried to twist it, shift the blame, minimize the damage. I didn't know what hurt more, the affair itself, or the person she revealed herself to be. That night in the guest room, I barely slept. My thoughts spiraled, looping the same questions over and over again. How long had this been going on? What did I do wrong? How could she look me in the eye every day, lie to my face, and pretend everything was fine? The images from the flash drive haunted me. They'd burned themselves into my mind like a cruel brand, resurfacing every time I closed my eyes. Her smile, her laughter, the way she looked at him, all of it was seared into my brain. That wasn't just betrayal. It was devastation. I spent hours trying to make sense of it, but the truth was, there was no logic to it. No explanation could justify what she had done. I couldn't shake the feeling that the life I thought we'd built together was nothing more than a carefully crafted illusion. The next morning, Emily tried again. She knocked softly on the guest room door, her voice tentative. Mark, can we please talk? I didn't respond. I couldn't. Just the sound of her voice filled me with a mix of rage and sadness so overwhelming that it left me paralyzed. By the afternoon, I finally emerged, not because I was ready to face her but because I needed to breathe. The house felt suffocating, every corner a reminder of what had been lost. I walked past her without a word, ignoring her attempts to catch my eye. Mark, she called after me, her tone desperate. I know you're angry, but can't we at least try to work through this? Work through this? The words rang hollow, almost laughable. Work through what? The lies? The deceit? The image of her with another man in the bed we shared? I turned to her, the weight of my exhaustion showing in my expression. I don't know what there is to work through, Emily. You made your choices. My voice was flat, void of the fire that had burned in me the night before. Her eyes glistened, and for a fleeting moment, I wondered if she actually felt remorse. But then she spoke, and whatever sympathy I might have had evaporated. It's not like you've been perfect, Mark, she said, her voice trembling but defensive. You've been so distant lately. I didn't feel seen. I didn't feel wanted. There it was again. The blame, the excuses, the subtle accusation that I was somehow responsible for her infidelity. It was like she was reading from a script, one designed to deflect guilt and shift the narrative in her favor. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. You think this is about me being distant? You cheated, Emily. You lied. You betrayed me in ways I can't even put into words. And now you're standing here trying to justify it? Her lip quivered, but she said nothing. I could tell she wanted to argue, to defend herself, but she knew she'd lost that battle. I left the house shortly after, needing to escape her presence, her excuses, her suffocating attempts to paint herself as the victim. I drove aimlessly for hours, the roads blurring as I replayed every moment of our marriage in my mind. Grief hit me in waves, each one heavier than the last. I'd loved Emily. I'd built my life around her, trusted her, believed in her. And now, all of that was gone, replaced by a hollow ache that seemed to consume me from the inside out. But grief wasn't the only emotion I felt. There was anger too, anger at her, at myself, at the entire situation. I wanted to scream, to break something, to let the rage out in a way that felt cathartic. But I didn't. I couldn't. All I could do was sit there in my car, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. When I finally returned home, the house was quiet. Emily was in the bedroom, the door closed, likely crying or pretending to cry. I didn't care. I went straight to the guest room and locked the door behind me. That night, I let myself feel everything. The pain, the anger, the betrayal, it all came crashing down like a tidal wave. I cried until my chest ached, the kind of deep, guttural sobs that leave you feeling raw and exposed. I thought about the years we'd spent together, the promises we'd made, the life we'd planned. All of it felt tainted now, like a beautiful painting that had been slashed to ribbons. And then, as the hours dragged on, a new feeling began to emerge. A sense of clarity, faint but undeniable. I realized that I didn't just feel betrayed by Emily. I felt betrayed by the version of her I believed in, the person I thought she was. And in that moment, I understood that I couldn't keep holding on to that version of her. It wasn't real. The weight of that realization was crushing, but it also felt strangely liberating. For the first time since discovering the flash drive, I felt like I could breathe. I didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain: I couldn't keep living like this. Something had to change. And for the first time, I felt ready to take the first step. The morning after my sleepless night, I sat at the small desk in the guest room, the flash drive in my hand. It felt heavier than it should, as if the betrayal it contained gave it weight. I stared at it for a long time, debating whether I should destroy it, hand it to Emily as some kind of confrontation ending mic drop, or just bury it in the drawer and pretend none of this had ever happened. But I couldn't pretend. That wasn't an option anymore. After hours of soul-searching, I came to a decision. I needed clarity, space to figure out what I wanted, what I deserved. And I couldn't do that under the same roof as Emily. When I finally emerged from the guest room, Emily was in the kitchen, her expression haggard and worn. She looked up at me as if she'd been waiting for this moment, hope flickering faintly in her eyes. "Mark, can we please talk?" she asked, her voice softer than it had been the last few days. I nodded, but instead of sitting down, I leaned against the counter, keeping a physical distance between us. "I've thought about this a lot," I began, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "I need some time away from you. From all of this." Her face fell, her eyes glistening. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm leaving for a while," I said, my tone firmer than I expected. "I can't keep doing this, Emily. I need time to think, to figure out what comes next." Her voice wavered as she responded. "You're just going to walk away? After everything we've been through?" I almost laughed at the irony of her words. She wanted to frame this as my choice, as if her betrayal hadn't set everything in motion. "I'm not the one who walked away," I said, my voice laced with quiet anger. "You did that the moment you chose him over us." Her tears began to fall, and she covered her face with her hands. "I was stupid, Mark. I made a mistake. I don't even know why I did it." I let her cry, her words washing over me without much effect. Her remorse, whether real or performative, felt too little too late. I'd heard enough excuses, enough justifications, enough deflections. None of it changed the reality of what had happened. "I've found a place to stay," I said after a moment, cutting through her sobs. "I'll be out by tonight." Her head snapped up, panic flashing in her eyes. "You don't have to do this. We can fix this, Mark. I know we can." "I don't know if I want to fix this," I admitted, my voice cracking under the weight of the truth. "I don't know if I can." Her face crumpled, but I didn't waver. I'd spent the last few days drowning in her lies, her betrayals, and the chaos she had brought into my life. Now, I was choosing myself. I packed my things in silence, taking only what I needed. Emily hovered near the door as I loaded my bags into the car, her eyes red and swollen. She didn't say much, just whispered one last, "I'm sorry," as I closed the car door and drove away. I didn't look back. I checked into a modest motel on the edge of town, the kind of place where no one asked questions. The room was small and sparse, but it was quiet, and that was all I needed. Over the next few days, I allowed myself to grieve. I cried, I screamed into pillows, I stared at the ceiling for hours, letting the waves of pain wash over me until they dulled into something more manageable. And slowly, I began to rebuild. I reached out to close friends, people I hadn't confided in for years but knew I could trust. I told them everything, and their support was overwhelming. They reminded me of who I was before Emily's lies, before her betrayal stripped me of my confidence and joy. I started journaling, pouring my thoughts onto paper, untangling the web of emotions that had taken root in my chest. I sought therapy, knowing I couldn't navigate this alone. For the first time in years, I focused on myself, not as a husband, not as a provider, but as a person. Emily tried to contact me several times during those first few weeks, leaving voicemails and sending long, apologetic texts. I read them but didn't respond. I needed this time, this distance, to figure out who I was without her. As the days turned into weeks, I felt a sense of clarity emerging. The pain was still there, but it no longer defined me. I realized that her betrayal, as devastating as it was, didn't have to be the end of my story. It could be the beginning of something new. And for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. It's been a few months since I left. Sitting here now, in my small but cozy apartment, I feel like I've lived a lifetime in those months. The wounds are still there, raw and jagged at the edges, but they don't bleed like they used to. Time hasn't healed them, not completely, but it's dulled the pain enough for me to think clearly again. Looking back, the hardest part wasn't discovering the betrayal. It was coming to terms with the fact that the life I thought I had was a lie. For so long, I clung to the idea that Emily and I were partners, that we built something strong and unshakable. Her betrayal shattered that illusion, forcing me to see the cracks I'd ignored for years. There's a strange comfort in that realization, though. It taught me something I wish I'd known earlier. Love isn't blind trust. It's not about ignoring the signs or making excuses for someone because you want to believe in them. Love requires honesty, from both sides, and when that honesty is broken, the foundation crumbles. I've spent these past months learning how to rebuild that foundation within myself. Therapy has helped. So has reconnecting with old friends, the ones I'd unintentionally pushed away during my marriage. I didn't realize how much I needed those connections, how much I'd isolated myself trying to keep a relationship afloat that was already sinking. Emily and I have spoken a few times since I left, mostly about logistics, bank accounts, the house, dividing up what we built together. Each conversation feels like a tiny funeral for what we once had. She still apologizes, still says she wants to make things right, but I've come to understand that some things can't be fixed. Forgiveness, though? That's a different story. I'm not there yet, but I'm working on it, not for her sake, but for mine. Carrying this anger, this bitterness, doesn't hurt her. It only poisons me. Letting go of it is a process, one I'm navigating day by day. If there's one thing I've learned from this experience, it's that betrayal doesn't define you. It doesn't have to be the end of your story. It hurts like hell, but it also forces you to confront yourself in ways you never thought possible. So, to anyone reading this who might be going through something similar, take it one day at a time. Don't let their betrayal make you question your worth. You are more than the pain they caused, and you deserve a love that doesn't come with lies and excuses. As for me, I'm not sure what the future holds, but I know one thing for certain: I won't settle for anything less than the truth. And for the first time in a long time, that feels like enough. Leave a comment with your thoughts on the story. And subscribe to our channel so you don't miss new interesting stories. See you soon.